Hello. Today we're going to talk about American culture through its core values. One of the most crucial core values to understanding your American colleagues, to working more effectively with those colleagues, is the pioneering spirit. Coming back to the pioneers, they come for various reasons: economic, socio-political, and also to create their religious Edens. Roll up your sleeves, everybody get down to work. Egalitarian. You can't have people just sitting by and giving orders. Everybody has to put their hands to work. And it's not because we're at the top of the pyramid that we shouldn't be doing ourselves that same effort. Taking risks is something that obviously the pioneers had to do to start settling on this very dry, arid land. And today, we grow up as little Americans hearing that we don't learn anything without taking risks. Take advantage of that window of opportunity, which is much more important than creating a fantastic product and missing the opportunity, is very much of an American concept. Think about today, don't worry about tomorrow. Short-term planning. We can't know what is tomorrow. We know what is today. Let's base what we know and make quick decisions. Go forward. Personal responsibility and personal initiative. I think this is one of the most fundamental. Taking the initiative shows that you're interested. Taking the initiative shows that you are willing to create that progress, willing to participate, and you're not scared of making mistakes because you know that you have the right to make mistakes as long as you learn from them, of course. But to take that initiative means that you are helping everything get along. Perceptions of arrogant Americans are a way of looking at some of the behavior that Americans are taught to put forward, such as confidence, being relaxed, and other aspects that in the United States are not considered arrogant behavior. I met an American. He was very arrogant. First of all, he took up a lot of space. He was loud. He was so confident, so at ease. And this is a term I often heard in France to define American arrogance, often stemming from a sort of US informality, décontraction. When I was a little girl, I would watch on Saturday cartoons with Scooby-Doo, Almighty Isis, Fat Albert. And as I was watching my programs, like many children did, there would be little grammar lessons are interspersed. And one of the phrases that came up constantly was this one: "You're the most important person in the whole wide world. Get up and show it." So why? Was I being taught to be arrogant? I don't think so. I was being taught to, in the ideal, to take risks, to go forward, to have confidence, and to maximize my potential as an individual. Because if I maximize my potential, I was helping the group. In the United States, there's a structured approach to time. A deadline is a deadline. How do we approach time? Do we do one thing at a time, emphasize efficiency? Time is saved, spent, wasted. These are things that we hear in the English language, and clearly the United States is much more on this side of the spectrum than over here. Over here, we see more cultures that believe that you can do several things at a time. This is a very different way of approaching time. It's also a different way of approaching a meeting. What do you expect from a meeting? Do you expect to go through the points on the agenda in a very systematic, linear way? Or do you kind of pop around and go from one point to the next? You have a timekeeper who says, look, we haven't finished this topic on the agenda. We're continuing to discuss it. Should we park it and put it for a later meeting? Or should we decide to just drop it here? But you get to everything on the agenda, and there's an end time as much as a beginning time. Although there are many different types of communication styles, there's a tendency for a direct way of speaking. Say what you mean what you say, except when we're talking about confrontational issues. What do you need to understand the full message? Do you need context, or is it explicit? Is it low context? You don't need context. I say what I mean what I say. It's very direct. In cultures that are more high context or more implicit, there's an idea that the speaker gives you a piece of the puzzle and that it's up to you, the listener, to have that context. And if you don't have the context, he or she will go to great lengths at explaining the context. It affects business relations and communication in emails. It affects it in presentations. It affects it in everyday one-to-one speaking. Because if you are in the explicit culture, which is more an American tendency if we look at the spectrum, it means that the meaning is explicit. There's a low tolerance for ambiguity. Even if you're not going to send me my document on time, tell me that. I have nothing to send you, so I'm just telling you that I'm here and I'm still worrying about your problem, but I have no news yet. So being explicit and not letting ambiguity build up is a very important aspect of working with Americans. The speaker has to be clear. If you are speaking, it is up to you to be clear when you are in a low context and explicit mode of communication. And that means also that the people who are listening need to be asking questions. Because if I've made it okay for you to ask questions, then I expect you to ask questions to help me understand how it wasn't clear. In a presentation, you go right to the essential. Here's the solution I suggest, for example, if you're an engineer in a project management meeting. Development of the arguments and the theory on a need-to-know basis. Don't have to give me lots of background, the history of the plant. We just want to give theory on a needs-to-know basis. And then to finish with a conclusion that synthesizes with a take-home message which should echo your main point memorably. This is quite different from in France, for example, the thèse, antithèse, synthèse, where synthèse is at the end. You give your main point at the end. A lot of the French people say to me, I've realized now that what I need to do is I need to put my last slide first, or that I need to, in my emails, put right from the start what I want from my American colleagues, that they want that from me. What's interesting, however, is that that's not the whole picture. Are Americans always so direct? No, they aren't. In other words, when they get to confrontation or situations that could be a little bit uncomfortable, then we tend to become less confrontational. Good point, Jack, but wouldn't it be possible to perhaps see this other situation that is also equally important? These type of little phrases that we use to tell somebody we disagree with them. You can be direct, it's good to be direct, but when you start getting on touchy territory, it's respectful to put little pillows and to take care of your interlocutor's face. There are two aspects that we can say about building relationships in the United States. First of all, more task orientation, getting quickly to the task. And secondly, a more peach approach to what building relationships is. Do we have a tendency to start with a task when we're at work and build a relationship maybe through the task? Or do we do the opposite? Do we need a relationship and it's through a long process of building that relationship can we ultimately get to the task? In the United States, we clearly see a much greater tendency towards task orientation. Focus on accomplishments. We often call these, the task-oriented cultures, such as the United States, doing cultures. You're defined by what you do, right? Not by diplomas necessarily as much. What is your experience? What is your professional experience? The idea that personality clashes are considered irrelevant. Okay, maybe we don't get along, but if we're working together, that has no relevance to the working world. In the United States, we do show emotion in the positive. Great, fantastic, well done, good job. But when it comes to the negative, then we really take away the emotional. Separate the people from the problem, take away emotion when you are in a professional context especially, because it will cause you to lose credibility if you show emotion in the negative. French woman, engineer, on the plane to go to the United States, sits next to an American woman, and within an hour she knows her life story. The American has told her that she's divorced, that she has a new job, that she's excited for her son that just got into Harvard, and she's telling her many things that this French woman would not necessarily tell somebody that she's just met for the first time. The personal and the private are not as distinct. The private is much smaller than the public. The public is larger than the coconut. And for the coconut, they were already in the private. Whereas for the peach, the American peach, this was just still public stuff. Very much stuff you share with people that you don't know necessarily. It's important to understand that when an American asks you questions about yourself, they're not trying to figure out your whole life story. They're trying to create connections to create that fast relationship building stage so that you can get down to work. Being an independent-minded individualist is a positive attribute to many Americans. What do we mean by this? Individual initiative is expected, rewarded, and admired. And since we're tiny, we are pushed to do this and think as an individual. It's interesting, I do oftentimes in team building seminars, I do a game called Zoom. And it's a project, a team building project. And almost systematically, when I have Americans and Germans and French and people from different countries, it's the Americans that take the initiative to organize everybody. Okay, let's get organized. And the Americans start, writing down everybody's card and trying to get things going. And systematically, I have somebody in the room who said, "Who put him in charge?" And the American looks and says, "I was just trying to get things going." How does taking initiative help the group along or push the others down? And in the United States, it's clearly a positive attribute. Equal rights, being egalitarian. To many Americans, this means creating a relaxed, informal, getting away from protocol attitude. In the egalitarian ideal, everyone is treated the same. Equal opportunity for all, regardless of class, gender, and race. Open, informal relations, first name basis. Protocol is very much lowered. In other words, the idea is that if you want to create equality, you create it on an informal level. We've talked about differences with American colleagues, but in the end, working with American colleagues is like working with anybody else. When you connect to somebody and work well together, it's a very enjoyable experience.